nuts and bolts. What we're going to talk about in this meeting are some of the basic understandings of 21st century electronically mediated communication you want to be aware of before you go into leading your meetings in weeks 3, 4, and 5. We'll talk about the difference between synchronous and asynchronous communication, formal and informal norms, netiquette, and cues. All of these concepts are considered pretty basic to online communication, but they each afford a different experience for you as the leader, for the people you're meeting with. They help set the tone and they ensure that your meeting and the work that you're doing stays moving forward meaningfully for everyone. So if these things are considered so basic, why are we studying them? Well, they may not be that obvious until we really take a look and think about the connection to 21st century communication, such as Maslow's hierarchy of needs. For most of us as educators, it's pretty common to take this into account when we're looking at a physical environment. But in a digital environment, it is just as important. Go down to the next bullet point. When we simply assume that everyone is comfortable and they know what they're doing and maybe they've attended a whole bunch of different meetings online, so there's no need to try and set a tone, well, we all know what happens when we assume. It's important that we clarify expectations right off the bat. Why? Because we're not going to have all the physical cues we do in a physical space. Body language, turn of the head, expression of the face, the way the eyes are looking. We don't have all of that online. So it's very important to communicate and clarify expectations up front. How do you want people to communicate? Do you want them to raise their hand? Do you want them to type in questions? Do you want them to wait until you're done speaking? All of that really does relate back up to Maslow, because you've given people a sense of how the tone is going to go, what the feel of the meeting is, and so they can focus in more rather than being so aware themselves. And this leads us down to the bottom bullet point here, learning experiences. Please don't ever forget that no matter how comfortable people are online, there's always going to be something a little different, whether it's the time of day or maybe there's been an update to the software or just what you're expecting of the communication could be a little different. So don't be afraid to blatantly call it out. Hey guys, I know we're having this meeting today and a lot of you have done this before, but let's think of this as a different kind of learning experience. Let's focus in on this or that, or, let's try something different. In case everything chunks out, I'm going to put up the URL for a wiki we can all go to work on, just in case. So these are the types of things that really empower people in your meeting to stay focused on what you're trying to accomplish, rather than being so focused on themselves and trying to figure out if they're actually adhering to the norms or meeting your expectations. So as a leader, you will have a lot of decisions to make. Do you want your team or the individuals you're working with to meet and work synchronously at the same time, asynchronously across time and space, again, using things like wikis or threaded discussions, those kinds of tools? Because these really are very different experiences, and they both can be very positive for accomplishing certain things, and they both can get in the way of what you're trying to accomplish. Let's first of all talk about the eyeball effect. We all know that there are some people who have a very difficult time receiving feedback or feeling like they're being assessed when the person is looking at them. Whether you're physically in the room or you're online at the same time and you have a video camera on, for some people that sense of being watched makes it very difficult for them to stay in the moment, stay cognitively on task. For those people, having brief one-on-one conversations with a lot of asynchronous work, wikis, sharing materials, emails, those can be very positive. But for some people, asynchronous work just doesn't quite cut it. Why? Because there are some people who feel like it's just not real. If I'm getting feedback, I need someone to be looking me in the eye. I need someone to be in the room, sitting there, standing with me. Well, if you can do that, that's brilliant. But again, sometimes it's just not feasible or reasonable. Time, space, it happens. So that's when you do want to make sure you use the video cameras or the webcams in your synchronous meetings. These are all the kinds of things that you as a leader need to think about to ensure that you're able to move forward toward your goals with the individuals you are working with and serving. So here's part of how you think about this. What are you really trying to accomplish at that moment? Are you trying to ensure fluidity? Is it working with people to see how well they're able to respond to things in the moment and go with the flow? Is it brainstorming that you really want stream of consciousness? Well, synchronous is much better for those types of experiences or communication or learning or data gathering, informal. However, if you're looking for something that has more of a reflective component to it, you want people to think about it for a little bit more, you really want them to be comfortable with the final presentation of their response, whether it's a sentence or a couple of terms, whatever you're trying to get out of your team, if it needs to be more reflective, then including asynchronous tools really serves that purpose. Now, let's be clear, this doesn't have to be an either or. There are facilitation tools for leaders that enable both fluidity and synchronous experiences with reflective components. How do you do that? This is how you design your meetings and your group work. Do you ensure that there are tools available, such as the chat box, such as digital notepads? Do you have people keep an email open and ask them to be taking notes and writing their questions that way throughout the meeting so they can just hit send when the meeting is over? Another great tool is to have a couple of survey questions posted up in your synchronous room, your synchronous environment, and tell people that you won't be gathering the information or click so we can all see the responses till later in the conversation. So they have the questions posted there. They can put their responses in at any time, but they have the opportunity to be reflective before responding. So again, when we are facilitating online meetings, online group collaboration, one-on-one meetings, we want to be very clear with where we're using synchronous, where we're using asynchronous, how much of an eyeball effect do we really want to use with this person or this group, and what are we really going for? Do we need immediacy and fluidity, or are we going for more reflection-oriented thinking? And we can have it all. We just have to be clear in how we design and run those meetings. Norms may seem, again, like something, oh, we're all grown-ups, we all know how to work together, but particularly when you are serving your peers in a mentoring position, when you are working as an instructional teacher leader, a practitioner leader, you want to be very clear with the explicit stated policy that whatever information they share with you or you share with them, that this does not relate to pay grade or this or that, whatever the policies are. And you will want to go over them again whenever you meet, but especially in an online environment, so it doesn't just feel like some disembodied voice is telling me what I'm doing wrong, blah, 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 blah. So please, please make sure that in your role as leader, as giving feedback, as the person who's asking questions in order to be able to give feedback, please make sure you are both, or whoever the group, go over the norms again, even if it's just quick bullet points. This leads us to the next bullet point: assumed cultural language, and then COP. COP stands for Community of practice. For a practitioner to move into an instructional leadership role, we need to remember that as educators, we all still are part of our community of practice. Yet being in a leadership role can change what was previously assumed as the way we speak together. All the cultural norms were understood, the language that we used. Many of us have a type of shorthand way of speaking with fellow teachers. All of that goes into our community of practice. And here's the wonderful thing. All of that is what empowers us to be so much more effective as instructional leaders, because we are practitioners and we're fellow practitioners. We're members of the community. That shorthand, that depth of understanding. However, when we move into a leadership role, we want to be very clear and transparent with our peers that we're still on that level when it comes to sharing information. Once you are in the role of giving feedback or asking more probing questions, you need to clarify it's still coming from a member of the community. It's not a matter of you suddenly changing the way you speak to people or the way you use the language that comes back at you. It's not about that. And people may very well feel uncomfortable. They may be second guessing themselves about using the right language around you as opposed to the way they used to speak to you. Please make sure you transparently address this. Let your team, let the individuals you're working with, please let them know that the language you're using, you're their peer. They don't need to go overboard being overly formal or using more academic language than they're used to using. You don't want to force them to not only have to be reflective about their practice with you, which, that can be a personal thing, but then to have to modify their language, the cognitive load for someone and the affective weight of that really will get in the way of you being an effective instructional practitioner leader. Which leads us down to the very last bullet point, tools used for various purposes. Think about the people you're serving. As a member of the community of practice of educators, the terminology, the shorthand, all that stuff that you've always been comfortable using with your peers, they may not want to put it down in formal paper, or they may want to use more formal language now because you're assessing them, evaluating this, evaluating that. So the more you can choose how you use tools. Do you have them work in Google Docs rather than write down things in a Word document that you have formally emailed to you? The kinds of tools that you can share comments and editing back and forth, and they don't have a fear that it's going to be held in a file somewhere or used in perpetuity. These are different ways that you continue to communicate both the formal norm of I am the leader, I am serving, I am working to make sure you're able to do your best, I'm here to support you, and informally, it's that virtual pat on the back, it's that virtual high five, it's I really am working with you, I'm here to support you. So choosing tools that your peers feel are more collaborative. Google Docs, Google Slides, wikis, things that are built for collaboration rather than I need a Word document of this, I need to see your PowerPoint and that. Prezis are wonderful tools where you are working collaboratively rather than giving people the sense that you're building a file on them. So our last two things. The first one, netiquette. Netiquette for an instructional practitioner leader really comes into play with your asynchronous communication, your emails, the writing that you do to people, especially when you're inviting them into a meeting or asking for feedback. Please make sure you remember in any kind of leadership position, you want to include a salutation, whether it's to an individual, Dear Sam, Dear Joan, or if it's to the group. Dear everyone, hello all. Make sure you include a salutation. Even if the content, like the agenda for the meeting, blah, 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 all of that is going to be in bullet points, that's fine. But first, please have a sentence or two to give context. Make sure that your subject line in your emails give context. Make sure that after your salutation, sentence or two of context, maybe then your bullet points, what to expect, what's going to happen, what you're hoping to accomplish, end with a closing. I look forward to seeing you all. I appreciate all your help. And then sign off with your name. Basic netiquette. Please do not forget that. So we move from netiquette into cues. We're moving from written language into spoken language. Please, in your online meetings, be very cognizant. Really listen and pay attention to the language being used, the tonality, whether someone is speaking an awful lot or you're barely hearing from them. You really have to pay attention to these kinds of social cues so you're able to recognize something's not right here, and quietly you can use the I am feature. Hey, are you okay? Shoot somebody a text. You're being awfully quiet. Is there a question you want to ask? Pick up on those cues before they cause a problem. Deal with them in the moment and they won't derail your meeting. So what does this mean for us as we get ready to lead our different meetings? We want to be mindful of all these different things before we actually meet. Yes, we know why we're meeting and we know what we want to accomplish. But seriously, taking the time to think through what elements do we want to talk through synchronously? What needs to be asynchronous? What do I need to be aware of formally and informal as far as norms that people know before they come in and as we're meeting? And then netiquette and cues, all of these things work together to ensure that our leadership is authentic and genuine and meaningful. Simply calling people together and then telling them what they need to do or demanding that they answer our questions, that's never going to afford the genuine give and take of information and ideas and problem solving and being able to support each other when things don't go well or we don't find what we're hoping to. All of this plays into leadership, and bringing it to our meetings, bringing it to our live facilitation can make the difference between a meeting where you walk away exhausted or one where everyone walks away pumped up and ready to move forward.